came to dismantle you with chaos, not courage. Their war had no code, only convenience. They weaponized moments of vulnerability and draped their cowardice in strategy. You weren't in a battle of intellect. You were thrust into an ambush of impulse, deception, projection. They didn't sharpen their blades. They threw dirt in your eyes and called it tactics. You watched them smile while feeding on your confusion, feigning misunderstanding as they rearranged facts like broken puzzle pieces. See, dirty fighters don't come to win fairly. They come to exhaust you. They scream louder when you whisper. They twist the knife slower when you heal faster. They don't want to beat you. They want to make you doubt yourself enough to beat yourself. And yet, you didn't stumble. You didn't take their bait. You studied the terrain, measured every step, chose silence when they begged for chaos. You never reacted. You responded. You never matched their filth. You refined your aim. Precision is not just clean, it's clinical. And when wielded with awareness, it becomes surgical. You cut where it hurt, spoke when it stung, walked away before they could count it as a win. Because you weren't fighting them, you were ending them. They needed the smoke, the fog, the blur between right and wrong, because clarity was your advantage, and they knew it. You see, the dirtiest players don't throw punches, they muddy waters, they distort timelines, rewrite conversations, pretend memory is malleable. They don't engage in dialogue. They engineer confusion. Every moment with them feels like walking into a room where the furniture's been rearranged just enough to make you trip, but not enough to prove they moved it. That's their game. Subtle sabotage, psychological graffiti. And they expect you to respond like they would, with impulsive rage, wounded pride, public outbursts. But you didn't. You rewrote the tempo. You whispered when they screamed. You paused when they rushed. You struck when they assumed you'd surrendered. That's the thing about fighting with precision. You don't need force. You need timing. One well-placed decision, and their entire narrative collapses. While they were swinging at ghosts, you were carving exit routes. You didn't walk away out of weakness. You walked away because staying would have made you just like them. Precision is power without mess, and that terrifies them, because messy people don't understand clean exits. Their strength was noise. Yours was nuance, and that made you a threat. They crafted chaos like a painter flinging blood on canvas and calling it art. But you studied their brush strokes, watched how their insecurity dripped from every insult disguised as a joke, every compliment dipped in poison. You caught patterns where they saw improvisation. You watched them perform righteousness with hands still stained from the last sin. That's why they feared you. You didn't shout. You saw. You saw too much. Saw through the fake apologies, the emotional whiplash, the timing of their affection, and you filed it all away, quietly, without flinching, without warning. See, dirty fighters need you flustered. They need you unstable. Because once you're grounded, once your eyes go cold and your breath steady, the entire game tilts in your favor. And when you started choosing your moments, cutting with a whisper, leaving without a trace, they panicked. Because precision eliminates options. And once you corner them with clarity, they implode. Loudly, publicly, pathetically. You became the villain in their story because you stopped bleeding when they expected more blood. That's how they frame it. Because they need the world to see your silence as cruelty, your boundaries as betrayal, your growth as arrogance. They fought dirty, yes, but they counted on you fighting loud. Because loud can be framed, loud can be spun, but precision leaves no fingerprints. It delivers damage without spectacle. It closes the door without echo. You didn't slam the door in their face. You just disappeared and let the silence rot them from within. No closure, no final plea, just the sharp, clean cut of no longer caring. They wanted fireworks. You gave them absence. And that, to a manipulator, is a fate worse than confrontation, because confrontation allows for revision. Absence confirms everything they feared was true. They weren't misunderstood. They were exposed. Not through vengeance, but through your evolution. You understood something they never could. Fighting well doesn't mean fighting often. You didn't react to every jab. You didn't correct every lie, because some enemies feed on the chase, on the idea that your energy belongs to them, even in anger. But you treated your attention like a scalpel, not to carve, but to cut ties. You observed without attaching, and when the time came, you didn't explode. You executed, swiftly, without ceremony. The same hands they tried to chain became the same hands that signed their irrelevance. Precision is knowing when, not just how. It's the art of letting them think they've won, until they realize you were never playing their game in the first place. And when they try to revisit the battlefield, to rekindle the old tension, they find you gone. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually. That's what precision does. It doesn't leave ashes, it leaves ghosts. And they will spend the rest of their lives haunted by the war they thought they won. They fought like addicts, hooked on the high of your reactions. You, though, you detoxed. You went still. And stillness, to someone addicted to drama, feels like starvation. They can't stand it. They begin shaking without your outrage, hallucinating meanings in your silence. That's why they fought dirtier when you grew quieter. Because losing control over your emotions meant losing control over their entire identity. They projected, provoked, poisoned, and you simply withdrew. But withdrawal doesn't mean weakness. It means you stopped bleeding into a battlefield that was never yours. You began to conserve. And that conservation, that's the language of mastery. While they swung wildly in all directions, trying to pin their pain to your presence, you became a void with memory, a void with boundaries. You fought the final war by no longer being available for war. They never aimed to win fairly. They aimed to win first. And so they rushed the confrontation, rushed the accusation, rushed the moment, because speed is their weapon. If they can keep you moving fast, they can keep you from thinking straight. But you moved like a sniper, slow, still, watching from a distance, timing your moves. You watched them burn bridges while you built exits. They thought they were outpacing you, but you weren't in a race. You were in a calculation. And when the moment came, you didn't retaliate. You didn't match energy. You transcended it. You dropped your final word like a guillotine. No rage, no drama, just consequence. And that's the beauty of precision. It doesn't leave you drained. It leaves you clean, light, unchained. Precision is learned in fire. You weren't born with it. You earned it. You earned it through betrayal. Through the nights you stayed silent, while your heart begged to scream. Through the restraint it took not to burn what you could have easily incinerated. You watched how they turned every vulnerability into a weapon, how they danced in the wreckage and called it healing. But you also learned, adapted, evolved. Pain taught you to wield focus like a weapon, to shoot truth like bullets, to never miss your mark. And now you walk differently, talk differently. Your tone cuts deeper than their loudest insult, because you're not trying to wound. You're trying to end cycles, Dirty fighters repeat patterns. Precise ones end them. They expected you to retaliate with fire. You responded with frost. You became untouchable. That's the ultimate revenge. Not proving them wrong, but becoming someone they can no longer reach, predict, or understand. They wanted to draw you into the swamp. Instead, you built a tower. And when they threw stones, you didn't scream. You studied the trajectory. You learned what they feared, what they valued, what they couldn't let go of, and you let that guide your parting strike. Precision means understanding the psychology of your enemy better than they understand themselves. It's knowing which word silences, which boundary breaks them. You didn't destroy them out of hate. You destroyed them out of understanding. Cold, clear, surgical understanding. They dress their wounds in designer charm. Their brokenness is stitched behind rehearsed smiles and hollow charisma. They overcompensate because they have nothing stable beneath the surface. They inflate every interaction, every reaction, every moment of validation because they can't stand the silence that follows. They fear that stillness, not because it's empty, but because it speaks the truth that they are built on fractures, on masks, on stories. Toxic people can't survive transparency, so they flood the room with noise, with exaggerated gestures, forced laughter, performative empathy. You've seen it. The way they become overly generous when they sense you slipping away. The way they compliment you after they've wounded you. The way they preach morality while engineering manipulation. It's all overcompensation. Every exaggerated act is a distraction, a diversion from the rot they refuse to face. You watch them act the part of the savior, the helper, the one who does so much for everyone. But their giving was never clean. It always came with strings, subtle, silken, poisoned strings. They offered support not from love, but from the need to be needed. Because needing to be needed is not love. It's a hunger, a parasite, a compulsive need to control through kindness. And when that kindness isn't met with praise, they erupt. Suddenly the mask slips, and their giving turns into guilt. Their warmth calcifies into entitlement. That's the game. They overdo, overextend, overexpress. Because if they're loud enough, dramatic enough, generous enough, they believe they'll earn immunity from consequences, from accountability. But you weren't fooled. You didn't bite. And that silence you gave in return, that shook them more than any scream ever could. Overcompensation is never random. It's a defense. Toxic people crave image more than intimacy. So they curate. They curate relationships the same way they curate online profiles. Highlight reels that scream security, charm, intelligence, depth. But real depth doesn't need to be broadcast. Real love doesn't need to be paraded. Only the insecure amplify what they can't sustain. And deep down, they know it. That's why they fight so hard to prove they're good. Not to you, but at you. It's a performance, a spectacle. But behind the curtains, their mind is a maze. And when you stop applauding, when you stop reacting to their theatrics, they panic. Because they weren't loving you. They were feeding off your belief in their illusion. You saw through it. You stopped playing. And that's when the overcompensation reached its peak. Desperate, obvious, hollow. They flood you with intensity in the beginning. That's always the tell. Toxic people do too much too soon. They want instant closeness, rapid bonding, an avalanche of affection before trust is even established. Because if they move fast enough, you won't notice the cracks. You won't see the patterns. You won't have time to vet the character behind the charm. Overcompensation in the early stages is always a warning. It's not love, it's a smokescreen, a frantic race to secure attachment before the truth has time to breathe. And when you slow down, when you question, when you apply boundaries, they flip. Suddenly, the same person who loved your soul accuses you of betrayal. Because you interrupted the script, you reminded them that real connection isn't rushed and real worth doesn't scream. They lie with sincerity. That's the craft. Toxic people overcompensate in their storytelling. They'll cry while they confess, shake while they share. But the tears are rehearsed. The vulnerability is weaponized. Because to them, being pitiful is just as powerful as being dominant. It earns sympathy. Sympathy earns access. And access is their favorite currency. They don't want to be healed. They want to be pitied. They don't seek growth. They seek permission to remain broken without consequence. And if you deny them that, if you ask for integrity, they'll accuse you of being cruel. Because to the overcompensator, being challenged feels like betrayal. Their performance only works if you keep clapping. But you walked out mid-act, and they're still raging in the empty theater. Even their silence is overcompensation. When you call them out, they don't respond with introspection. They respond with absence. Not to reflect, but to punish. They disappear to control, to make you miss them, to make you question yourself. That's not distance, it's a tactic. It's not maturity, it's manipulation. Because the moment you chase, they win. You give them power by seeking clarity, closure, kindness. But you don't chase anymore. You've learned that silence isn't always peace, that absence isn't always maturity, that walking away first doesn't make them right. It makes them afraid. Afraid that their favorite trick stopped working. Afraid that their show finally lost its final viewer. Toxic people mirror what they think you want, not who they are. They overcompensate by becoming a reflection, not a reality. They mimic your interests, your values, your wounds. But it's mimicry, not resonance. They use reflection to gain trust, then flip it to gain control. That's why the person they pretended to be disappears once they have you. Because the mirror was never real. It was bait. And you're dangerous now, because you stopped responding to the reflection and started questioning the depth. You realize that anyone who needs to become someone else to feel loved is already telling you who they really are. Hollow, temporary, performative, and unworthy of your peace. Their anger, too, is overcompensation, explosive, sudden, disproportionate. Because fragility, when cornered, lashes out, not to communicate, but to intimidate. They overreact to rejection, over-explain their lies, overstep your boundaries. Because in their world, subtlety is weakness. To keep control, they must dominate the emotional space. But your stillness is a language they can't translate. Your calm is a threat. Because they can't dance if you don't provide the music. You learned that your silence wasn't passive, it was precise. And while they screamed, you watched. And while they accused, you walked. Because you know the difference between chaos and communication. And you don't speak chaos anymore. You owe nothing to people who use performance as a substitute for substance. Let them rant. Let them rewrite. Let them reinvent themselves for a new audience. You've seen behind the curtain. You've watched the pattern repeat until it bored you. You don't seek revenge. You reclaim your energy. And that withdrawal, that cold, clean, unapologetic withdrawal, that's the ultimate truth bomb. Because nothing exposes a performative soul faster than someone who no longer plays their game. Terrible people, operate on one belief: you will eventually stoop to their level. They don't try to beat you with truth. They don't challenge your strength directly. They rely on corrosion, slow, consistent, calculated erosion of your standards, your morals, your identity. They believe that if they can drag the game out long enough, if they can provoke just the right amount of rage, confusion, or desperation, you will fall. Not in a dramatic crash, but in an inch-by-inch collapse. One boundary ignored, one insult forgiven, one self-betrayal justified. That's how they win, not through force, but through slow moral decay. Because they know their greatest weapon is your need to be understood, your desire to explain. And in that desire, they see opportunity. If they can keep you just reactive enough, emotional enough, tempted enough, they can drag you into their arena. Because terrible people never fight for clarity. They fight for collapse. They don't respect your restraint. They resent it. Your discipline, your silence, your poise, it humiliates them. Because deep down, they know they couldn't survive a single day with your self-control. They lash out in the hopes that you will respond with equal venom, that you will stoop, just once, to their level, so they can label you as the same. That's all they need. One misstep, one outburst, one retaliation, so they can say, "See, you're no better." Because they can't win clean, so they try to dirty the arena. You're not just the opponent, you're the proof. Proof that goodness, clarity, and peace are delusions, that everyone eventually cracks. They are betting on your fall, because your integrity is a mirror, and they are desperate to smash it. You must understand this. Your refusal to stoop is not passive. It is war. It's the highest form of violence to someone who thrives in chaos. You don't need to attack them. You need to outlast them. You need to keep showing up with unshakable energy, with distance so cold it burns, with focus so sharp it disarms. They want to bait you into the mud, into the yelling, into the chaos, because they've built a home in dysfunction. It's where they feel powerful, where they know the rules. But when you walk around the trap instead of into it, you become terrifying. Because now, you're not just unbreakable, you're unreadable. And unreadable people don't bleed the way manipulators hope. Terrible people are gamblers. They place bets on your reactions. They test, they poke, they wait. Their entire strategy is built on prediction. They study your wounds and throw salt just to see which one makes you twitch. But once you stop twitching, once you stop being readable, their game dies. They become disoriented. They get louder, more erratic, because what they expected was not your evolution. They expected you to break. They never planned for your awakening. They never planned for you to rise so far above their level that you stopped playing altogether. Your detachment is their defeat. Not the absence of love, but the absence of access. They want you to react because they know they can't reach you through reason. They can't argue with facts, so they invent confusion. They can't handle distance, so they fabricate drama. If they can get you emotional, they can stay relevant. If they can get you to insult back, they can claim you were always the problem. They don't fight for resolution, they fight for illusion. And illusion only lives if you stay inside their script. The moment you drop the script and step outside the theater, they're no longer actors, they're exposed. The spotlight fades, the applause dies, and all that remains is a person screaming into a void that no longer echoes. Your control is violence to their ego. Your clarity cuts deeper than any insult ever could. Because while they're throwing darts in the dark, hoping to hit something soft, you are standing in full light, unmoved. That's what breaks them. Not your anger, but your absence. Not your attack, but your refusal to be pulled in. You didn't match their darkness. You became immune to it. And that immunity, that's what they never anticipated. Because terrible people aren't built for endurance. They're built for immediate gratification. They need results, fast reactions, visible pain. But your silence starves them. And starvation, for them, is collapse. The longer you refuse to stoop, the more they unravel. Because without your participation, they are nothing but noise.